In these scenic waters off a once poor Mexican fishing town here in the Gulf of Mexico, a local fisherman one day began to see oil drenching his nets. At first, he thought it might be from a leak on a passing ship, but day after day the oil continued to foul his nets until, the story goes, he contacted Mexico's state-owned oil company, Pemex. It was a call that changed Mexico forever. Pemex figured out that it wasn't engine oil from the guts of a ship, it was crude oil from the floor of the sea, and that there was lots of it. A simple fisherman here, almost 40 years ago, pointed Pemex to one of the richest finds in history. And this is where it led. Within a few years of the discovery, Pemex filled this part of the Gulf with platforms like these. It became the world's most productive oil field outside the Middle East, and Pemex became Mexico's piggy bank. To honor the fisherman who found it, they named this fertile offshore field after him, Cantarell. And the number 2 principal at Pemex today, the man in charge of exploration and production, Carlos Morales, says the piggy bank has been a big boon to Mexico.
We have a better country today. I'm convinced of that we have a better country today, and that Pemex is a big player in this, let's say, in this change that the country have experienced. With those resources, the government has dedicated those to educational infrastructure, health infrastructure, and transportation infrastructure in general.
But now, Mexico's economy, its security, America's oil imports, even the health of the Gulf of Mexico could be in jeopardy. Because the wells in Cantarell are no longer producing what they once did, what the company had called the easy oil.
From about 2005 until 2009, this thing really dropped off faster than anyone expected.
Jeremy Martin is the energy expert at the Institute of the Americas in San Diego.
I think in terms of easy oil, it means having a massive discovery that was practically, took little to nothing to find in terms of investment, in terms of original infrastructure. And so, yeah, that's gone. That easy oil is gone.
This rock, this core sample, yes, the fact that it is so porous, is this what has made Cantarell so productive? Yes. The trouble is, Cantarell isn't even Mexico's most productive oil field anymore, let alone one of the world's. According to Pemex's own figures, shared with us at a briefing at the edge of the Gulf, output that once added up to more than 2 million barrels of crude oil a day, roughly the same as the United Arab Emirates, already has dropped by a quarter, and the decline continues. Current projections are that at this rate, Mexico, long a proud exporter, could be importing oil less than 10 years from now, which jeopardizes the growth they've been enjoying here, a whole modernizing infrastructure based largely on just one company and one resource, oil. Is it in trouble?
It is in big trouble. We have a very sharp declination rate in our production.
Miriam Grunstein is an attorney in Mexico City who specializes in the oil industry.
The fiscal dependence we have in Mexico for oil revenues can cause a big social crisis because many social programs are funded with fiscal revenues.
Like what?
Housing, roads, hospitals, education, municipal services, landfills, police. We're going to run out of public money, and we need services, and this country has a huge poverty gap, so how are we going to fund that?
Pemex has an answer to that question, drilling in waters deeper than it's ever drilled before.
The amount of the resources that we have there is around 29 billion barrels.
29 billion barrels.
29 billion barrels. It's oil yet to find. We still have a lot of work to do. We still have to learn a lot. We still have to, let's say, understand many things. But we have, I can guarantee you that with the things we do, we don't run any unnecessary risks.
But that may be debatable, because while some call this oil yet to find crucial for the well-being of the nation, Others say it puts Pemex on a potentially perilous path, possibly downright catastrophic for the economy and ecology of the Gulf of Mexico. Pemex insists otherwise, and to try to convince us that they're right, the company agreed to give World Report an unprecedented look. We left for Cantarell from Ciudad del Carmen, the home of the fishermen who got this whole thing started. We flew about 45 miles from the coast and landed on a drilling platform called Tonalá. The water beneath this rig is 70 meters deep. That's about 230 feet, considered shallow in the business of offshore oil. The oil and gas they're going after is another 9,000 feet down through the Earth's crust. But with today's technology, that's all considered pretty basic. Remember, this is the easy oil.
Abrimos completamente el cilindro.
But before we ever even got to learn what we could about the operation out here on the platform, we were given a safety briefing, complete with instructions for using a gas mask and directions for where to assemble for the lifeboats. It was a briefing that was repeated on every rig we visited, and a reminder about just how dangerous an oil platform is, no matter how shallow the waters underfoot. We couldn't even wear anything but cotton underneath our flame-resistant jumpsuits. In a fire, something synthetic would too easily stick to the skin.
La explosión de dos oleoductos de Pemex en Texmelucan, Puebla, ocasionó la muerte.
And as if to hammer home the inherent dangers in the oil business, while we were in Mexico, there was an explosion at a Pemex pipeline onshore. Apparently, local citizens were tapping into it illegally, stealing fuel. The latest figures are 29 people died, half of them children. As for safety with the systems on this rig, just off the center of the platform, a couple of engineers went to pains to explain some technology they have on board that many of us learned about only after last year's disaster with BP's Deepwater Horizon, the blowout preventers, which are meant to shut down the well at the first sign of trouble.
1, 2, 3, 4. And close this.
They showed how they'd close down the well, but I asked, "You're always ready to close it?"
Siempre ustedes son listos cerrarlo.
Se debe. Así es.
Siempre.
Así es.
Maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds, no más.
2 seconds, 3 seconds, he said, no more. Our next destination, an oil processing platform called Deepsea. Zop means charcoal. It's more than 60 miles from shore, but still in what are considered shallow waters, which means no more than 500 meters or not quite a third of a mile deep. At any given time, 220 men and women are at work on this rig. The typical shift is 14 days on, 14 off.
The sheer scale of what they do on a platform like this is awesome. On this platform alone, Mexico processes almost 250,000 barrels of oil a day. And that helps explain that Mexico is one of the world's biggest oil and gas producers and one of the biggest exporters to the United States.
We are, no doubt, I'm not pretending to sound pretentious, but we are the biggest operator in the Gulf, including everyone.
But as Pemex's productivity in these shallow waters begins to peter out, the company sees just one place to turn to, waters it doesn't know nearly so well.
The fact is, the reserves, the treasure under the sea, this is what it's been called, is in the Gulf of Mexico. It's in the Mexican deep water.
The problem is, for all of Pemex's experience and all its success so far, it has only been here in the shallow waters of the Gulf. Drilling deep is much more difficult and much more dangerous.
Here the thing is, we're trying to go to Mars before even first going to the moon.
Lourdes Melgar is an oil expert at Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is sometimes called the Harvard of Mexico.
The problem here is that Pemex has expertise mostly in shallow waters. That's where they've really excelled. That's where they've developed most of their technology, their know-how, and they've been pretty good at it. The problem is that when you go into the deep waters, you're talking, as we saw with the case of Deep Horizon, of situations where you cannot just have, a diver go fix something.
Everyone remembers BP's Deepwater Horizon. It was April 20th last year, drilling in almost a mile of water. First a blowout, then explosions and fire. 11 crewmen died, and as much as 5 million barrels of oil fouled the Gulf before the hole could be plugged. It was the worst oil spill in history. President Obama's special panel just today blamed poor management decisions and outright mistakes that, quote, combined to overwhelm the safeguards meant to prevent such an event. What some fear is that by drilling in Mexico's deeper waters, Pemex could cause something just as bad or even worse.
I think people are extremely worried that if a company that's never even been in a situation of managing a 2,000 or 3,000 meter well is now going to be doing this, and they're used to Cantarell and 100 feet of water, how are they going to be able to handle not just the infrastructure, but the management and the operation and safety issues? And God forbid anything that goes wrong, how are they going to handle that? If an accident does happen, how are they going to manage the response to that?
And the Obama panel pointed to one more inexcusable lapse by BP and its partners: cost cutting.
My fear is also that there will be financial constraints that will push Pemex to count beans and to make them operate unsafely. And they might take chances. They took chances in BP, and BP itself is paying for it, and the rest of humankind is as well.
World Report is back. Once again, here's correspondent Greg Dobbs reporting from Mexico.
In the heart of Pemex headquarters here in Mexico City is this mammoth sculpture of President Lázaro Cárdenas. When Cárdenas ran the country back in 1938, he kicked out all the foreign oil companies and nationalized the industry. Today, Pemex is the country's single biggest company with about 160,000 employees. And the billions of dollars it produces in revenue account now for almost 40% of the national budget.
People in Mexico, it is a part of the DNA. I mean, Pemex is the national icon. So, you're always going to have to work within that parameter.
But now it's more complicated than that. Mexico's constitution prohibits Pemex from actually partnering with foreign firms in exchange for oil. So it is only offering cash to companies experienced in the deep water like Exxon or Shell or BP in exchange for their expertise. But many oil analysts say that large international oil companies aren't likely to buy in for cash because they prefer to be paid in oil, the value of which can rise.
They want oil. I mean, they don't want money. If they want money, it's to get access to reserves. It's like asking the tiger not to want the meat. It's in the nature of oil companies to seek oil. And Mexico doesn't give oil.
Which means, at least for now, Pemex and Mexico must go it alone. Is Pemex capable of efficiently and safely drilling in deep water?
At this time, we have no proof that it is capable of doing that safely and efficiently.
David Shields covers Pemex for Mexico City's most popular paper, Reforma. Do you have any reason to believe they wouldn't be just as concerned and therefore careful about the safety of deep water rigs as everybody wants them to be?
Yes, I think they must be concerned, but they're also pressured to push oil production up as far as possible.
Pressured because?
Pressured because oil production is falling and because that affects revenues.
So if a critic says that Pemex is hell-bent on drilling in the deep water to create more production without regard for environment, without regard for technology, they're wrong.
They're wrong. They're wrong because we are very conscious of the environment. We are following the rules that the same rules that rule in the US and other parts of the world to perform this type of jobs.
I think Pemex is concerned about the environmental impact of their activity. I'm just saying that because of the pressure that Pemex is under right now in terms of increasing oil production. Environmental concerns are secondary.
To be able to technically operate and manage the field, you need people who've done that under extreme conditions, hurricane season, these kinds of things. They've done that elsewhere, and Pemex doesn't have, by nature of what they've already done, which is shallow water and onshore development, they don't have the technical teams that can go out and develop, operate, and manage these wells and platforms. And as we've seen, even the companies that profess extreme competence and understanding of these issues don't always make the best judgment calls on some of these platforms.
Like BP?
I think, obviously, right.
And what would happen if there was an accident such as the Deep Horizon on the Mexican side of the Gulf of Mexico? That would mean the end of fishery, the end of tourism, maybe the end of the coral reef in the Caribbean side. I mean, the economic consequences and environmental consequences for Mexico would be huge.
Carlos Morales, the Pemex chief of exploration and production, concedes that deep water is someplace his company hasn't been before, but needs to start somewhere.
Like everybody else, we have to learn, no doubt. No doubt that we have to learn, but we have the capacities.
There are critics who say you haven't had the opportunity yet to learn enough to be going into such risky territory.
Well, if you look after what happened in the U.S. Gulf back in the 80s, they also learned, and it took them 10 years or so to really learn how to work in deep waters. The rigs that we are contracting, for instance, they are 6th-generation rigs. They have the latest technologies available. They have crews, experienced crews. We are not working with let's say, with freshmen. We are working with very experienced crews.
To prove all that, Morales agreed to take us to see Pemex's deep water drilling operation, a first for any journalists, which put us on a helicopter out of Veracruz and landed us on Pemex's newest and biggest drilling rig in the Gulf, Centenario, named to commemorate the 100 years since the Mexican Revolution. It was built in Singapore, weighs 60 million pounds, and crossed 2 oceans in 3 months to get here. It has been in place only since September, drilling its hole in the seabed, which is more than 6,000 feet down. Now, they're already 10,000 feet beyond that, deep into the rock. Once on board, and only after another safety briefing, we were taken to the bridge, where the captain, Bastian Vencelar, introduced his crew.
We have Jonathan, he's a DPO, he's from Mexico. Then we have Shane comes from Canada, and James comes from the UK. Normally we have 2 persons on this place always, but since it's now midday, we have the shift handover going on.
And you're from the Netherlands?
I'm from the Netherlands, yes.
Almost everyone here, most of them on shifts of 28 days on and 28 off, is a foreigner who has worked at least 5 years in deep water just to get here, always for companies with a track record in deep water drilling. So that question about crew experience seemed quickly settled. But equally, maybe even more important, how about the rig itself? It isn't just drilling in deep water. At almost 1.25 miles just down to the floor of the sea, this is called ultra deep. Why should anyone have confidence that Centenario and its crew can keep a small hazard from turning into a huge disaster?
We are looking at the fire and gas panel. This is our safety system. The moment the sensor would activate, we see immediately on what deck.
And when you're talking about fire and gas, you're talking about toxic gas, you're talking about combustible gas.
Any gas release, yeah.
In the engine rooms, 8 huge American-built Caterpillar engines put out enough power to light a small city. They feed powerful thrusters to keep Centenario precisely over its drill hole. When we were there, this colossal semi-submerged rig, taller than a football field is long, was all of 10 centimeters off-center. The heart of the drilling operation, which is controlled from the cage-like structure you see on the right here, is dead center in the rig, just a few feet from the shaft of the drill. It's called the Doghouse. All 4 of the men in Deepwater Horizon's high-tech Doghouse died. They hadn't reacted as fast as they should have. If there's something abrupt and catastrophic, are you the guy who stops it?
Yes, we will. We have a BOP panel over here at the back.
What does BOP mean?
Blowout preventer.
This is the epitome of a newest generation oil rig. Everything is automated. Most of the once hands-on work is robotic, with not just backups for everything important, but double backups.
A series of valves is the easiest way I can put it. It's a series of valves that can close around the drill pipe. Some of them are capable of shearing the pipe into, and we can release the upper portion of the BOP from the lower portion and drive the rig off safely and get off location if need be.
Dutch deepwater veteran Andre van Veen is the superintendent on Centenario. Would you argue that there's less chance of a Deepwater Horizon kind of incident here on this rig?
I don't know exactly the ins and the outs of the accident. I would say there is not a possibility of these things happening here if everybody is doing their job. Systems on itself can't close these things off 100%. You still have people in the line of action who do need to watch gauges, who do need to watch what's going out there and take a decision. If that's not done, then faults can accumulate and it can end up at like a Deepwater Horizon.
Part of the problem is, until very recently, Pemex, a state-owned monopoly, has always regulated itself. There has been no independent watchdog. In fact, critics have long charged that because it has been so autonomous, Pemex has not done everything possible to maximize safety and protect the environment. That's why, only 2 years ago, Mexico's president created an oversight agency, the National Hydrocarbons Commission, to at least try to ensure that Pemex is ready for deep water drilling, something so much more complex, so much more dangerous than it's ever done before.
The regulator's interest is trying to get Pemex to implement best industry practices in general. And I think it's been very forcefully argumented that even onshore drilling in Mexico historically has not had best industry practices. Neither onshore drilling nor drilling in shallow water.
But the creation of a watchdog doesn't make one question go away. If Pemex is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, will it actually change the way that for decades it's gone about its business?
Pemex is a huge beast, and whether or not they would follow what the Commission says is another question.
If you know our neighbors are finding so much oil in the north part of the Gulf of Mexico, then you have to go for it.
One of the new Watchdog Commission's 5 members is Stanford-educated petroleum engineer Edgar Rangel, who wants Pemex to succeed but insists it does need help. If this commission had never been created and you're an outsider looking in, would you trust Pemex to employ best practices and to be careful not to move too fast?
I would trust them less. I would trust them less than what I trust them now that I know that the commission is doing it.
But the creation of this new watchdog agency, which will soon issue its first report on deepwater drilling, is not the end of the story.
Whether they will be able to make Pemex, to mandate Pemex to do all of the recommendations that they are going to come up with in their report is an open question. And I think it's an important open question. Now it will be the responsibility of this watchdog, this National Hydrocarbons Commission, to make sure that they are, will be, and continue to do so.
Now, I've had people tell me, and I've read, that the National Hydrocarbons Commission is a great idea, but it has no enforcement powers. As somebody said to me, the commission has no teeth.
Maybe. As today, the most important thing, and it's this law, it's called the Law of the National Hydrocarbon Commission. It says that all the sanctioning of the ruling, every decision that is made by the board has to be public. You have to make it public. And that gives you a lot of strength, because you have the strength of the society.
Has that been tested yet, or is it too soon?
It's too soon. Yeah, it's too soon.
So the question that still hangs out there is, how will Pemex respond to the Commission's recommendations?
At least in the first year, the acceptance from Pemex of what the National Hydrocarbon Commission has been wanted to say has not been easy, you know. The attitude has been sort of like, you know, brushing it aside.
What do you say to Americans, particularly who live along the Gulf Coast, the southern United States, to give them assurances that they don't have any new worries just because Pemex is now in the game?
Pemex has been in the game since many years ago, and now we are going deeper. That's a fact, you know, that we are going to learn, and we have the skills, we have the people, we have many, let me tell you, we have many, let's say, Americans that work together with us. We are not alone.
Pemex is acquiring best equipments, like top of the top equipment. They're training their people. I think we'll be fine. It's just a matter of
So is there no reason for anybody to be concerned?
Definitely, we're concerned. The Commission is concerned. The Minister of Energy is concerned. The federal government, the President is concerned. That we have to work on the best regulation, the norms, the activities, so everything is safe. Yeah, and we're working on that.
If that's true, and Pemex is not moving too fast to do it right, it is very much in not just Mexico's but America's interest, and not just because the two nations share the environmentally fragile shores of the Gulf. What are the implications of all this, do you believe, to the United States?
Well, I think, you know, the United States has an interest that Mexican oil production doesn't collapse, or, you know, particularly that Mexican exports don't fall below a certain level, because Mexico has been for many, many years a dependable source of oil for the United States.
It has national security issues.
For us.
For us, because it has such national security issues for Mexico. The last thing we want is any further destabilization of the national economy in Mexico.
Pemex has 2 rigs right now, including Centenario, operating in the deep water. It has 2 more on order from South Korea. And as it pulls its new treasure from the Gulf of Mexico, there will be many people in Mexico and in the United States who will watch these waters with a new eye, some with hope, some with fear.